Friday, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I serve as the lead learner of the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. We call ourselves COOL for short, and you can find out all about us on our website at cool.us or cool.us. Just head on over to the website. You can check out all the resources we have, including a lot of member-led content. Folks like Pete Stone, Cassie Owens-Moore, Alex Del Castillo. We have members creating a lot of content, and we post it there. Steve Newsom's articles are posted there as well, along with a bunch of different opportunities that COOL provides, including COOL coaching, our retreats, and a bunch of other great resources. So head on over to cool.us to learn more about our Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. I'm broadcasting live from my porch this morning. This evening, I hope that you are having a wonderful start to your weekend. We usually do these on Wednesday, but we needed to reschedule our guest, and I was happy to do that because I'm very excited about tonight's guest. Her name is Mary Woods, and some of you may have heard her story or read about it in the newspaper or have seen it, in the news. She's an educator here in Chapin, South Carolina, where she instructs juniors and seniors in advanced placement and upper level English. She believes she can help to develop empathy in her students as they grow their understanding of unfamiliar cultures, belief systems, and ways of life. In the past year, Mary faced censorship in her classroom when students complained to school board members about a lesson on systemic racism, which resulted in the removal of Ta-Nehisi coats between the world and me from her students' hands. What followed was a firestorm of calls for her termination from parents, legislators, and community members. Still, she continues to teach, pushing back against efforts to whitewash truth in literature. She is a story and courage, and I'm more than happy to welcome Mary Wood. How are you tonight, Mary?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's a beautiful night here. I'm in Myrtle Beach. I got to be outside. I want to do this outside if I can. Um, I'd like to start with what drew you to teaching English specifically?
Well, that's a loaded question. I grew up with teachers, and I swore I would never become a teacher. And that obviously shifted. I studied literature when I was in college, and it was really beautiful because it opened my eyes up to different perspectives that I didn't have an exposure to growing up here in Chapin. And that's true, I think, for a lot of places. But I studied literature that was mostly non-white, post-colonial, and feminist, and it helped me to understand the world in ways that I figured that things were like how things actually were, but that wasn't provided to me. And so that became very important. Understanding other perspectives, understanding other ways of life, understanding how structures developed over time, and how we came to live in the society that we do. And so that was the first component of it. And I came to start teaching in part because of becoming a mother. And I intended to go to law school, but I didn't want to leave my baby at home while I went into a program that was super intense. So I decided that I would have a schedule that was more attuned to my growing family. And I began teaching first at Midlands Tech in the evening as an adjunct instructor. And then as my kids grew older, I went into public schools.
So, I think I hadn't heard your name, I don't think, until this controversy, if you want to call it that, in 2023, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it came up. So this happened during the school year, the 2023 school year, and I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you were teaching this book, and you were teaching about systemic racism, and I'm confident that you were doing it responsibly and in a balanced way. But it's like the truth. I mean, it's the truth, right? So, and the exploration of that should be free. And tell me a little bit more about what specifically happened, like from your perspective, what the story is. Maybe give us some behind the scenes stuff, if you're comfortable doing that.
Sure. I'll go as far as I can. We are in litigation right now, but the book came into my hands during COVID, after George Floyd was murdered, and my English teacher colleagues and I decided that we would book club Between the World and Me, to understand that perspective a little bit better, the Black perspective, what it was like for Ta-Nehisi Coates to live in America. He's imparting information to his son. The way that it's composed is outstanding. He's a genius as far as writing goes, and so that's a big part of it too. But the perspective is very important. And so when I taught AP Lang again in the 21-22 school year, I decided to add that book. It's hard to get kids to read nowadays. I'm sure that you've had other people explain that to you before, but they just aren't that interested in reading. And so to find books that are engaging is hard, but this book is very engaging. And I decided that for an AP Lang class, it would be a great opportunity to explore a perspective that they were not familiar with, to see the development of an argument, and to see how somebody writes well. So they are doing all of these things. They are reading this book. They are engaging with the perspective with which they're not familiar. And it actually went off well that first year. The second year that I taught it was when there was the controversy, if you will. And I was quite surprised. You know, we are supposed to talk about different topics, challenging topics, controversial topics. And those are, you know, according to the AP expectations and guidelines. And so we endeavored into it in the same way that I had the previous year. I had developed a really lovely classroom culture. Students had different perspectives, which is sometimes unexpected in a school like mine, but they sure did. And they would talk about different topics and have debates that were healthy. At the end of the debates, they would, you know, talk about what they were going to have at lunch. Nobody ever walked away with hurt feelings, you know. And so then when that book came along, I was quite surprised that there was pushback, but we read about half of it before the students, whichever students complained, whichever parents complained, I'm still not aware, decided that it was a problem, and the school interfered, the school district interfered, and I was asked to remove the book from my students' hands and then create a new unit for my for the argument unit, which is, in my opinion, the most difficult unit for AP Lang.
If I touch on an area that you're not comfortable with, please feel free just to say I can't comment. But
Okay.
my understanding is that one of the complaints from the students was that it made them feel guilty, which I found, I don't know if that's true, but
Mhm.
it made them feel a sense of guiltiness for being white.
Right.
And I find that interesting because I'm not sure that I'm not sure that sometimes students are really good at understanding the emotion that they're actually feeling, which could be discomfort.
Yeah.
And then, but they've heard the narrative about white guilt or whatever, so that's what they're calling it. But instead, maybe what they're feeling is discomfort. And I think that discomfort is actually something that if we're teaching history the right way and teaching literature the right way, if you're not feeling any discomfort, then you're actually teaching propaganda.
Mm.
So it talk a little bit about that, like, and we don't even have to talk about this specifically, but just about the teaching profession and this idea of teaching history or talking about some uncomfortable truths about our past and why that's so important. In your bio, it talks about the importance of building empathy. Talk a little bit about that.
I mean, by nature, literature is supposed to make people feel uncomfortable. A plot line has that, right? You have the exposition, you have rising action where tension builds, you have the climax where things are tense, right? They are discomforting. Uh, that is the premise for literature. If it's not making you feel a little bit uncomfortable, it's not going to be as engaging, right? We don't want to just read something that's all about rainbows and unicorns all the time. So the idea that students shouldn't feel uncomfortable is counterintuitive to reading literature. The fact that we are in this space where white guilt is an issue is strange to me. If you don't study history and feel uncomfortable, if you don't study about slavery and feel some kind of, emotional response, or study the Holocaust and feel some kind of emotional response, then I don't think that well, number one, you're probably not being taught the correct way about those things. You should have empathy. The beauty of reading other people's perspectives is that not only do you see the world from different places, but you see a connection between you and people who worship differently, who have different cultures, who have different languages, whatever it is. But inside of all of those differences, they have a mother who might drive them crazy, a boyfriend who's broken their heart, fears of the future, wanting to get into college or to fit in with somebody. And so there is a connection. That human experience is the same no matter what you're reading or who you are. And in that way, we can bridge those gaps and hopefully make the world a better place and bring people together.
Right. And clearly no teacher is trying to make any student feel guilt, like to take on the guilt of the atrocities that have happened in the past. But I think what we are trying to do is to elicit a greater understanding of the perspective of other people, people who are like us and people who are not like us, people who lived in the past and people who have experienced life in different ways. And we can only do that if we read books about it, or learn about the histories of people other than ourselves.
Right.
And so that cultivation of empathy, uh I'm really struggling with trying to understand, like I've tried to steelman it in my head, like what the problem is with social emotional skills like empathy, teaching those things in schools. Like what do you think, not looking at this specific case, but looking at, because this is happening to educators around the country, this sort of self-censorship and also forced censorship and books being removed and book challenges. What do you think is ultimately behind this?
You know, I feel like in my case and with the Black perspective, I remember during COVID, um, I don't, I'm not a Fox News consumer, but I remember seeing a report on Fox News about CRT. And that was during the Trump administration, right? And so I remember seeing that buzzword come across the screen, and I just knew then that we were like at the beginning of something that was about to be very dangerous as far as literature and history goes. And so I think that there is a push, and I don't mean to be political, but it is political, an extremist push to maintain a status quo, because the world is global and people are becoming more connected and in a lot of ways progressive. And that progressiveness challenges the status quo. We know that an educated democracy is a successful democracy, and a successful democracy might make the world more equitable. And I'm not certain what is wrong with that, but I guess those people who are in power seek to maintain their power and they are afraid of relinquishing it. I think that, in my opinion, that has a lot to do with it. Other books that are being challenged and banned are LGBTQ books, and maybe people are afraid of their children finding a platform or finding a voice to reconcile their own um, feelings or their own truths. Um, Maybe that's what it is. People are afraid of what happens if people develop empathy. What happens if people lose power and control? What happens if their children, aren't what they want them to be? I run this through my mind quite often. An illogical person might say, what's the matter with all of those things? And so you have to get into the mindset of the people who have a problem with those things. And maybe that's a good place to start from.
I think that's a really good assessment. I've thought about it a lot too, and I think there's a cynical political power thing happening. This is just my idea, that there is a sort of billionaire class that would like to hold on to power, but realizes that there's not that many billionaires, right? Most people are living at lower middle income, and the only way to maintain power is to get enough of those lower middle income people to vote against their own economic interests. But you can't make the economic case for that, really. So what you have to do is create division. So you create division based upon race, based upon sexual orientation. You create these and religious divisions, and then you exploit that division and create fear, like you mentioned, the critical race theory boogeyman, that we all know wasn't in schools. Now it's gone from the CRT 3-letter acronym to DEI is the new boogeyman, and then it's Marxist indoctrination, it's grooming, and then it's repeating those narratives over and over again, even though they're not true,
Right.
to the point where enough people in the lower middle economic groups uh, are willing to vote because they're scared. So there's that. I think there is that mixture of this sort of cynical power play, but also there is fear about change and fear, like you said, about what if my child is LGBT or Q, and I lose control over that. Like I want to be able to control that, and so I think that political strategists have really figured out that if we can tap into someone's limbic system and really tap into their fear, we can get them to do whatever we want them to do.
I agree. There's a lot of psychological manipulation, and it's true. Like the CRT is not being taught, right? How did diversity, equity, and inclusion become negative words? It's a very Orwellian playbook
Yeah.
that is going on, and so it's dishonest, it's inauthentic, and it's counterproductive for humanity.
Yeah. I wondered that myself, and some folks have made the point that with DEI, they won't say the words diversity, equity, inclusion, because when you say those out loud, when you don't just say the acronym, the DEI, the letters, when you say that, well, tell me what it is about diversity you don't like. Tell me what it is about equity, about
Right.
inclusion. Like what about those specific things do you have a problem with? It's more like they just kind of conflate DEI with whatever their definition of woke is, and and just throw it all in. It's all CRT, DEI, woke, whatever. It's all just let's throw a name at it that we can sort of brand people with, and just gin up this division.
Yeah.
And the latest thing that I saw was Stephen Miller talking about how schools now are not going to receive federal funding unless they teach patriotism to their students. And I wrote something earlier today about this notion of instructing students to be patriotic is so counterproductive. If you're actually wanting to create real patriotism, you create a country, you do the hard work of creating a country that's committed to justice and equity, love, compassion. You don't go in and just force people, say by default you're going to be patriotic. That at best that teaches a very shallow, disingenuous form of patriotism. What are your thoughts when you hear about this idea that schools need to be centers of patriotism, and sort of instruct and inculcate students with that?
I mean, aren't we already centers of patriotism? We say the Pledge of Allegiance every single morning, right? We sing the national anthem before events. I think that we're already patriotic, and in some ways that can feel propagandistic. I think that if we want people to be patriotic, then they should have respect and pride in their country. And pride doesn't come from some place of a country being perfect. I trust people who admit their faults. I trust people who show their flaws. I trust people who tell me about a journey of their life that shows that they've been through struggles, that they've failed, and they've learned from their lessons. And I think a country is as much the same way. We're not North Korea, or perhaps we are becoming North Korea, but to pretend like we don't have mortal sins because we do. I remember that I didn't learn enough about Native Americans. I know that I did not learn enough about slavery. And had I would have trusted my country a lot more. I wouldn't be second guessing it now the way that I am. Why are we hiding these things? Why aren't we being honest? So patriotism is not just blind loyalty. It's understanding the complexities. It's seeing um, the failures rising above them, and what you do to reconcile the faults. And if we don't show students that, I mean, they might, you know, put their hand over their heart for the Pledge of Allegiance, but that doesn't mean that they have faith in their country. It just means that they're going through the
Absolutely.
motions.
I like to use simple metaphors to try to reach people, because it's very difficult to counter program narratives that really get ingrained. But one of the things that I thought about was when Shane Beamer or Dabo Swinney. I'm a Gamecock fan, so we'll go with Shane. So
Go
when
Cox.
Shane Beamer is when they have a football game on Saturday, and then they go into the film room on the next day or the next week, and they're breaking down the film, they don't just show the highlight reels, right? And go, yay, we're great. The Gamecocks, you did everything just right. Let's just celebrate and party and just wave the Gamecock flag and let's just keep watching these highlights on a loop. It's yeah, they'll show, probably, I'm sure they show players, here's what you did right, and here are the things that we can do better, and here's some mistakes that we made. And maybe some of the players even feel a little bit uncomfortable that they made a mistake or whatever. But that's where growth comes from, is looking at the whole picture, looking at what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what can we learn from both of those things, the right and the wrong. And I think that's what every teacher that I know wants to do in teaching history or teaching literature in a meaningful way, is to help students examine historically, not just America, but where has humanity gone wrong? Where have we gone right? And as we look to the future, we haven't arrived yet at this final state of like everybody gets along. We still have Israel, Gaza, we still have Ukraine, Russia, we still have political strife here in America. So how do we get to the place where we want to be if we're not willing to examine critically the mistakes we've made and we're continuing to make?
I see this too in my classes, when we'll have discussions about topics, or I'll ask, for answers to questions for homework, and kids are afraid to offer feedback, or they're afraid to provide their answers. And in order to seem infallible, they'll cheat, right? They'll use Chat GPT or whatever it is, because they are afraid to not get things right. My mantra is that you cannot succeed without failing first. You should be comfortable in being wrong. And if kids are Chat GPTing their way through school, if they are afraid to engage in conversations because they are afraid to be wrong, then there are so many foundational problems with that. First of all, they're not going to actually learn anything if they're cheating their way through. And second of all, they're not going to learn about other people or what they have to say, because they're going to close themselves off from what they might learn from somebody. They're not going to engage in conversations. And so if we pretend like we are perfect all the time, if we don't show our flaws, and that goes with America or the Gamecocks, I like that analogy a lot, then we will not arrive at a place of decency, of progress, of actual success and achievement in our country.
Well said. What I think a lot of teachers in your position would have just backed down and would have sort of scrambled to just try to make things right. And I'm wondering where you summon the courage to push back.
I think part of it goes back to my own upbringing. My parents would come home from work and complain, and I'm like, why don't you say something to somebody? Right? Like, so I decided that when I was going to be a teacher, that I wasn't going to be one who didn't express concerns or try to make the most of the situation. I'm not going to suffer on the sidelines, I suppose. But also, it was the right thing to do. Why in the world would we censor a perspective because it is from a Black man? Why would we say that learning somebody else's perspective makes me comfortable? That means it's not valid and or not valued or welcome inside of a classroom. It was the right thing to do. And I'm glad that it happened to me because I know a lot of teachers are afraid. I think that there could probably be a lot of other teachers that this has happened to, and they may have just acquiesced to the demands. So I'm glad they kicked my hornet's nest because I'm not like that. We live in a world that is not equal. We live in a world where a lot of children suffer, where a lot of adults suffer, and I have long been committed to social justice. I think it's very important to try to make this world safe for everybody because it is not. And um, so that is my commitment, and I wasn't going to let that just go.
Were Did you find solidarity from other educators, maybe school librarians, folks across the state, maybe across the country? I know Mr. Coates came to one of the school board meeting,
Mhm.
so I imagine that was probably very inspiring. But like, where did you get that solidarity from?
Well, for the first few months, I kicked and screamed uh, publicly, or to as much as I could publicly, by myself. A lot of people, teachers are kind of, no, they're not kind of, teachers are pretty much in an abusive relationship, I think, a lot of times. We kind of just take what's thrown at us and do what we're told, and for fear of losing our jobs. And so for the first little while, I you know, wrote emails to different people and tried to get something done, reaching out to different resources for help, and it was to no avail. It wasn't until the article by Bristol Marchant from the state newspaper came out, where the story became national news, that other entities reached out. I did have support, behind the scenes and privately, and that was lovely. But if I'm honest, I got a lot of pushback. I got threats. I had, people trying to get me fired. I was outcast in a lot of ways. And so I understand why some people are reticent to put themselves out there. Whenever the article came out, it was nice to hear from people around the country, whether that was, parents, people who had been in school at some time, some teachers, professors at universities, would contact and express support or solidarity, or share their own stories. And so that was lovely, and it was empowering as well. Of course, Ta-Nehisi came and attended the school board meeting after the one where everybody was basically asking for my head on a platter. And so that did happen. It was nice. One of the things that he said to me when he reached out was, we know that, teachers are people with boots on the ground, and, it's incumbent upon authors to help these people who are reading their books, who are teaching students, using their material.
I imagine that there were probably some sleepless nights and some anxiety, especially when the story goes national, and then also just receiving these nasty messages and feeling um, like being persecuted. Um, and so, like, what were some other things what were the strategies that you used to help get through those difficult moments?
Um, I mean, I growing thick skin is very important, and I think I have a different kind of resolve than some people. I tapped in a lot to the idea that whatever discomfort I was feeling pales in comparison to the people um, who have come before me who have actually been, I mean, women are marginalized, but let's be real, Black people have been far more marginalized. LGBTQ people have been far more marginalized. So you look at the people who have gone through far more than you, and you realize that, like, getting some email from some weirdo in Arizona is not the worst thing that could happen. I also, think that if people want to ostracize me because they don't share my beliefs, then I'm okay with that, because I probably don't want to sit at a table with somebody who would lean into racism or bigotry. That is one thing. Um, Practicing yoga helped. Making sure that I spend a lot of time outdoors and getting my endorphins helps as well. And, you know, those were the things. Live music helps as well.
Yeah, yoga's helped me through some really difficult moments in my life too. Where there's something about being able to move that energy around because you're just carrying, you're like, I mean, just dealing with something and taking in this energy, this negative energy, and then it's there, and it can really feel like it gets stuck. And
Yeah.
yoga helps move it around at least a little bit, like kind of loosen it a little bit for me. So I love hearing about that. Danielle Gray, I'm not sure who that is,
I
but
knew her.
Danielle, she
Yeah.
asked if there's a strategy to bridge discussions between what might appear to be radically left or right. And I would just kind of add on to that question. What would be your advice to educators who want to continue to have these important kind of conversations? I think these absolutely necessary conversations in history classes and English classes, and maybe school librarians who are bringing these issues up. What would be your advice to them, including what Danielle asked about?
So I remember maybe it was like 5 years ago. I was teaching an AP Lang class and, talking about different controversial issues because they're interesting to kids and also part of the curriculum. And my principal at the time came and visited me, and he said, "I hear you're talking about a lot of liberal topics." And I said, "That's not a thing." I said, "Those are called topics. The where you land on a topic could be, liberal or conservative." I said, "They're just conversations that people are having." And I think that um, fostering the conversations about those topics is a good place to start. And then creating a space that's safe enough for people to explore radically left or radically right perspectives. And that was essentially what I was trying to do in that AP Lang class, right? Like, to give students a space to have discussions so that they can understand other people's perspectives, so that they can come together. The purpose of AP Lang is civil discourse. And we have gotten away from having discussions in civil manners and banning books, censoring teachers, censoring students. That is antithetical to bridging those discussions between what might be radically left or radically right.
Absolutely. I taught journalism, high school journalism, and we would talk about current events. We would watch news stories, and then we would just talk about them, and we would talk about politics and political races and that kind of thing. And having that space where students feel safe sharing what their political opinions are, what their philosophical opinions are, and all of that, and just having a place where they can, as long as you're insisting upon, we're going to respect one another. We're not going to. It's not going to be. We're not going to come down to like calling people names and insulting people and saying you're stupid or that kind of thing. But like we can be in a space and have different opinions and actually learn from each other, because I don't see how anybody can grow and learn. I think about where I was as a young man, like 12, 13, 14 years old, where what my political and religious and philosophical beliefs were there. had I not been exposed to people who thought differently and had deep conversations with those people and was comfortable and felt safe enough to share stuff and push back and kind of debate and then hear their pushback, that was how I evolved and grew as a thinker and as a person who I think better understands the world now because of those conversations. And some of those positions changed, some of them stayed the same. And the ones that stayed the same, I felt even more like strongly about because they'd been challenged. But I think so many people now just don't want their ideas challenged. They
Yeah.
just want to be a part of some type of echo chamber, and that they want their kids to go to school and not hear any other opinions. They just want their family or their church's opinions to be the things that dictate this child's worldview. And that's just not preparing young people for a very good future, because if we can't as a society talk and disagree in ways that that are free and open, then I think what you'll see is just an amplification of this sort of division that we've seen over the past 15 years or so, where now you can't even have Thanksgiving dinner with people who
Right.
have a different opinion, and that's really, to me, pretty sad.
I had a conversation with Joy Reid. I was at the Democracy Summit at Howard University. It's like in 2023. And we were speaking about how, local policy affects our democracy. And the panel that I sat on had to deal with education. And of course, I fangirled over her because she had led a panel discussion that followed mine. And we had this really, lovely conversation about book bans and how schools and other places, universities, elite universities, observe students who come out of states like South Carolina. They are, cognizant of the fact that they might be limited in their access to develop conversational skills, to understand other perspectives. And that means that they're not readied for academic settings that challenge their notions, that prepare them to meet with people that they don't know, that they don't look like, that they don't believe like. And so we are not just protecting them from other people's beliefs, insulating them in a way that's dangerous. So, I mean, those schools might not want the students, but also, how safe are our children going to be stepping into a world that's outside of their bubble, that hasn't prepared them to meet people who don't share their, perspectives? They're not going to be able to have conversations with them. It could be quite dangerous.
Yeah, and this is one of the many concerns I have about using public tax dollars to fund private school vouchers, because a private school can actually indoctrinate students. Like that, it's always projection, right? That you're indoctrinating kids, but it's actually the people who are shouting that who are saying, no, what? Not that way. We do want to actually indoctrinate kids, but we're not going to call it indoctrination. But we want it done our way. No, we don't want any opposing views or this balance. We just want them to learn it this specific way. And my concern is that these public dollars going to private institutions that actually can really brainwash kids into a particular worldview and not allow them a space to be exposed to other types of ideas, that's an incredibly dangerous recipe. Because if we continue to deconstruct public schools and everybody's going to private schools, even if there's like these private schools that totally agree with my particular worldview, I don't want my kids to be so like insulated from the rest of the world. I want them to be around diversity. What are your thoughts about school vouchers?
I think that's another backdoor segregation, in my opinion. Like straight up, that is the goal. And segregation between like along racial lines, but also along socioeconomic lines. And that's part of maintaining that status quo. I call it all state sanctioned indoctrination. That feels like that's where we're going. There was just a discussion. I can't remember the number, but a House bill the other day, was it Tuesday? And there were discussing about criminalizing literature and art, that people,
Yeah.
even parents, had presented to their children. And it's always ironic to me that these people say, I don't co-parent with the government, where you're relinquishing your parental rights to the government by voting for these people. So yeah, but back to vouchers, I cannot, they infuriate me. I'm stunned. I'm not stunned. It is South Carolina, but they've been proven to be unsuccessful in other places before. It's as if we look for ways to be, to move backwards in time here in South Carolina. But that's the plan, that status quo.
Right. Yeah. I can't understand why more people don't see how illogical private school vouchers are. And I've made this point before. It's like I don't use public transit. I don't ask the government for a, a gift card to buy a car. If I don't use the public library, I don't ask them for a gift card to buy a book at Barnes and Noble. If I don't use public parks, I don't ask the government for a gift card for a cruise or vacation. So the idea that, like, if I'm not going to use the public education system, that the government owes me a gift card to go buy a private education is
Right.
the exact same thing. And yet people somehow, I think it goes back to the point I made earlier, where I think there's this cynical piece where it really is about these private entities wanting to get their hands on education, and
Oh,
then they exploit people's fears around religion, and they make well, the public school system is godless, communist, Marxist, grooming
yeah.
pedophiles who are DEI, CRT, whatever. We're going to throw it all at the wall. We tried the test score thing, and that didn't quite do it. We tried to demonize unions and teachers. That didn't quite do it. So now we just have to go let's go to plan DEFCON 5, and let's call them pedophiles and Marxists. And that's working enough that people are now supporting these voucher schemes. But I think it's a recipe. It's such a recipe for the complete destruction of democracy, or whatever democracy we have left. To get rid of the public education system is really just a complete surrendering of democracy.
I mean, there is a reason that we are so down on the list of educational success in South Carolina. I think there's a direct correlation between how we vote and how educated our people are. It's obvious that more educated populaces tend to lean more, forward thinking. And so I think that that's really where a lot of it comes from. And if you have these private education systems that can indoctrinate those children, you can have highly educated people who still lean to, the right. And so they're, obviously it's all mixed together, right?
Yeah, Peter, I don't know Peter, but Peter has asked, what are your opinions on creating change agents with a critical consciousness in K-12 public schools? What is that?
A critical consciousness. I don't know that we educated. What is that? What is he saying?
He's saying educated. I'm not sure if he's referring, because I know critical consciousness. I know there's this work by Paulo Freire. He talks about critical consciousness. I'm not sure if that's what you mean, Peter. Well, I'm going to put the question back up there, and while you're thinking about it, I'll try to answer it. I think what Mary's done, and what most educators do, is not to try to push kids into any particular worldview, but to just open up the conversation to worldviews. And sometimes books do that. Sometimes a history lesson does that. Sometimes having a guest speaker does that. And just allowing kids, making sure that all students feel safe. And I'll give you an example. When we were at Carolina Forest High School, I started the Young Democrats group, and shortly after, another teacher said, well, if you're going to have Young Democrats, we're going to have Young Republicans. And I said, well, that's great. That's awesome. You do that. And let's set up some time for our students to debate each other after school. And we set up actually a mock debate in school as well. And it's that kind of atmosphere where you're not saying, like, you're not in your classroom making it clear that the liberal or the conservative viewpoint is the right one or the wrong one, and that you're kind of punishing or like subtly saying, that's not right. I mean, it's just like just creating an atmosphere where those kind of important issues can be discussed respectfully. That to me will create change agents. It may not be the change that you personally want, but we saw a lot of those kids who were members of those clubs go on to be lawyers and politicians and that kind of thing, because they'd had that experience of working with ideas.
I agree. Okay, so we don't make change agents, right? We hopefully develop critical thinkers who go on to understand the world in a broad and diverse way. And so hopefully the goal is never to make somebody have a certain set of values. It's to make sure that they're thinking through everything well enough to make sure that they're contributing to humanity and ways that are good for everybody. And so I think it goes along with what you said, exposing people to other people's perspectives, to different, to conversations, to creating a safe space for them to have conversations so that they can engage and not necessarily change their minds, but so that they have some space where they can work from with other people that they don't agree with, right? Or that they may agree with at some other point in time. Find compromise.
And there's also a really lighthearted way to go about this, to have fun with it. That was my approach, was let's have some fun with this. Let's talk about ideas, but at the end of the day, we also have things we have in common. So we have these Venn diagrams, right? And with you and me, and like maybe we both are huge Star Wars fans, but you're conservative and I'm liberal, and we could talk about Star Wars, and you
Mhm.
can tell me how, as a Star Wars fan, you can be a conservative, and I can talk to you about the liberal ideas I get from Andor or whatever. So it's like, I think that we have to show students that when there are these points of conflict, that point of conflict isn't the entire human being, that there are other aspects of our humanity, and that we can figure out ways to connect with one another, and also be in dispute with one another without dehumanizing each other. And Peter keeps talking about this critical consciousness, and he's saying it is a lens for viewing the world, and he wants us to define critical. So
So critical thinking, I mean, that's nuanced, complex thinking. It means that you don't live in some kind of like things are not black and white. You understand that the things are on a spectrum, and there's not one way or another of doing things. That there's a whole spectrum of opportunities for discussion. It is, yeah.
I also think it's like when you hear an idea that you don't automatically accept it, that there's actually there's layers of thinking, and it's almost like a scientific view of like, I'm going to be skeptical about adopting or assimilating a new idea until I've kind of thought through it and put it up against other people, and say, well, what do you think about this idea? Okay, he thinks this, what do you think? And going to people that I respect, whose wisdom and knowledge I respect, with a new idea, and hearing that out. I think that would be another way of looking at being critical. Is, I think sometimes critical has this negative connotation, but in this realm of critical reasoning, critical thinking, it's incredibly positive, and something that I feel like we're losing. I feel like this younger generation, I'm not sure that they're getting enough experience with critical reasoning.
I mean, we have peer critiques, right? So students look over each other's work and they offer peer criticism. We see that criticism is bad, that like listening to something that might not be perfect is bad. It is good to hear what other people disagree with. It is good to understand where we can improve, to offer our suggestions too, where people can improve, as in critical theory. I don't think that critique is bad. I think that, I mean, you said something about conflict. We shouldn't be running away from conflict. We should be, we see conflict as a war. It shouldn't be a war. Conflict should be a place for discussion. It should be a space where people can come together, observe one another's differences, and then hopefully come to some kind of a resolution, right?
Yeah. And I do want to acknowledge sometimes in this kind of a discussion, I can sound a little insensitive to folks who maybe they've just dealt with so much, they've dealt with so much bigotry that they don't want to be exposed to any more like hateful ideas. And I think that there needs to be a distinction between, like, we have a different political idea, we have different philosophies versus like people who are spewing hateful bigoted rhetoric.
Right.
So last question, Danielle asked this. So what's the next move? It seems we're all divided. Kids only hear muffled teaching. It appears that radical groups are forcing teachers to become widget makers. So what is the next move, Mary?
I think that we move forward with love in our hearts, right? That's antithetical to hate. To create a space that's full of love, not to sound hippie-ish, but light is important,
Yeah.
I think that, where was Danielle's question again?
It
I
was how do we move? Like, what's the next move?
The next move. We are all very divided. I
Yeah.
don't know. The leading with love is has always been very important to
Oh,
me. Creating a space that is empathetic is very important. I think sticking to our values, um, not giving up. That I think that a lot of what people want us to do is to just acquiesce to these demands. There's a reason that there is a teacher shortage. There is a reason that people are, you know, um, are not fighting back. And I think creating some kind of like a sense of community where people can come together is a really wonderful place to start. I think that parents who support teachers, that would be good. I think people need to understand teachers are not indoctrinating children. If we could indoctrinate children, I wouldn't get a million emails a year asking if I will accept late work. The children would do it in class, right?
yeah.
I think that, we have to contribute to a narrative that is honest and authentic. I think, empower other teachers to stand on their merits and help people to understand that we are just humans trying to make this world a better place. We care
Yeah.
about our jobs because it supports our democracy.
Yeah. I really like that idea and resonate with the leading with love and just using love as your anchor. I think you can't go wrong when you start from a place of love, and you keep returning to that in the midst of being angry and disappointed and frustrated and scared. You just keep recalibrating to that love, and then once you feel okay, that's like a Wi-Fi signal, like I'm back into that space of love and compassion. Then I think that's when your next move, Danielle. I think that too many times what happens is we get angry or scared, then we make our next move out of that anger and fear. And in my experience, those are kind of lighthouses. I typically make mistakes when I move in anger and fear. So for me, it's noticing when those emotions come up and then working with them, whether it's through yoga or meditation or whatever, and working through those, processing those emotions, and then coming back, realigning with that love. That helps me clarify what the next move should
Yeah,
be. So,
I
um,
agree.
Mary, thank you so much I want to thank you. Like, your story is very inspirational. There aren't a lot of teachers who have the courage to stand up and have the courage to withstand the public scrutiny that you have and still stand tall and still want to be public facing with this story and these messages. And I just want to thank you for that courage and thank you for what you do for students and what you're doing in the state of South Carolina. And I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate everything that you said. I was raised by really wonderful people, and And I think that it's important to take care of the world and to nurture it in the best way that we can. We're not here for a long time, so you have
Yeah.
to make the most of it for while we're here, right? So thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome, Mary. Thanks so much.
Have a good night.
All right, you too. All right, everybody. That was Mary Wood. If you did not, if you're just tuning in, please go back and watch this whole thing. It's an incredible interview. Mary was an incredible guest. Before we leave, I just want to share a couple of things. So we mentioned, both of us mentioned yoga. If you'd like to learn more about yoga, our cool yoga series by Alex Del Castillo is on our website. It's if you go to the Cool website and you look at the wellness tab, there's a tab for yoga, or you can just type in cool.us/yoga. Also on to something a little more practical. If you are an induction teacher in your first 5 years of teaching and you need some support, that isn't like in your school or your district, just somebody who's kind of unbiased and who is confidential, you can receive free online one-to-one support through our Cool Coaching program every Tuesday and Thursday night from 6 to 8 o'clock. You just log on at cool.us/coaching, and you'll be put into a breakout room with one of these 3 amazing educators who will answer your questions and give you the advice and feedback that you need. Also, along the lines of yoga and meditation and realigning to love and all that good stuff, we have 2 educator wellness retreats coming up. One's in June, one's in July in Old Fort, North Carolina. We do these at Indigo Nature Retreat, and it is Lisa Garcia is the owner, and she's a wonderful person, and these cabins are just amazing, and they've cleaned everything up from Helene, and it's just this beautiful quiet retreat center just east of Asheville. And we have, I believe, 1 space left in the July retreat, and we're taking waiting list folks as well, and some people will probably cancel. So if you're interested in doing that, it's 3 days 2 nights. It includes your meals, yoga sessions, meditation sessions, a book, all of your accommodations in beautiful cabins. And it's $150 for members of the SCEA, $250 for non-members. If you want to do that, you probably need to do that this weekend. Go to cool.us/retreat. Coming up next, when is this? Next week on May 7th, we rescheduled this conversation with author William Mayer. I know him as Bill. He wrote a book called Are You a Kid Connector Today? He's an administrator up in Ohio, and he was here. I taught with him in Carolina Forest, and he's a good motivational speaker, and he's a coach and an educator, and you will leave pumped up. And he's does such a good articulating why it's so important to connect with kids and how we can connect with our students so we can make a greater impact with them. Coming up on May 28th, we have the next episode of Cool Beans, our teacher induction show with, excuse me, Angelica McDonald and Dr. Marcella Weinsnyder, my co-partner here at Cool. And we're going to be talking about financial tips. That's going to be May 28th at 6 o'clock. And the last thing I want to talk to you about is if you are, or anybody you know, trying to pass the praxis, we have a partnership with NEA and study.com to give you access to study.com's tools to help you pass the praxis. And to access that, you just go to cool.us/praxis, and you can sign up for a free account with study.com. And there's also other great resources on that website. I want to thank everybody who tuned in on the chat. Peter Woods. Okay. And I'm not sure what Peter's trying to accomplish, but God bless you, Peter. And Danielle, and Debbie, and Amy, and Tamara, thank you so much for tuning in. And the last thing I wanted to share with you is a trailer for a documentary that I created. And if you are interested in watching this documentary, it's a 3-part series. It's called Rehumanizing School. It's on the Cool website as well. It's called cool.us/rehumanizing school. So I'm going to show that trailer. And if you're interested, just go to the website, cool.us/rehumanizing school. And you can check out all those episodes for free. And please share, if you watch it, comment, share. And if you'd like to host a screening, I'll be happy to do that as well. So here we go. And thanks again to Mary Wood, and I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
One of the things that I treasure about Blue Mountain School is the genuine relationship we're in with each other here.
And what I've experienced at Springhouse is that when you're actually in community together, both at Springhouse, but then again in this small town of Floyd, it's like you can really tend to someone's development where they are transformed by what we're doing. And I really trust the young people that are going into the world.
Now I see my connection to the earth, and now I know where I fit in the cosmology of the world.
For me, it's helped me really meet like all of the needs I have for like rest and introspecting and the self-care I need to do and building relationships and being in nature. Yeah, it's very honoring of that rather than an end goal.
There's a lot of love here, and I think that love is something that doesn't always have a place in education.
My friend Riley, he was shy for the first 3 days of school until on Thursday while he was at recess up in that tree over there. I asked him what his name was and what he liked to do. From then on, we bonded and made friends.
Once you get to know this place a lot, you just feel welcome. Life's just kind of easy when you get to know this place a lot. And, you have friends.
When he came here, he told me that this is one of his best places he's ever been in his life. I was like, oh, well, that's good. Like, Floyd is a really good place. Like, you get to have fun, especially at Blue Mountain. You get to see really, you see a lot of kids' happiness. If you went to Blue Mountain, it would probably make your heart warm up.
Well, this sounds really a bit conceited, but my teenagers are extraordinary. All of them here are. I love all the kids here, not just my own, but they're extraordinary. And the thing is, I look around when I go out and see like the real world, the normal, the norm, and I think all these people could be.
If you're not cultivated, if you're only brought up to do what you do because you're afraid of getting in trouble or you want a prize, that leaves the self undeveloped. And so what I would love, and what happens here at Blue Mountain, is we are cultivating a self that can then be self-directed, can be self-regulated, and then grows up to be what it's really meant to be, rather than a reaction or a response to these external things. There's an actual, oh, I'm a seed and this is what I'm growing up to be.
So that's what this school is for teens and adults, is to really support the natural development of a unique individual person. There will never be another person like you or I or anyone. And it's so hard for me to understand how we can't hold that with such reverence.